This one might be especially controversial because on account of there is no such thing as magic in this dreadful place we call the real world. So all of this is incredibly arbitrary, and a lot of people are going to have a lot of very strong opinions. I just hope that we can all learn from each other. This is System Agnostic Classes, and here are your caveats. None of these are meant to be for any particular system, hence System Agnostic Classes. They're just vague interpretations of something made a little more concrete. These definitions for these classes are just the way I like to roll. If you like to roll in a different way, or if you like to apply different words to your rolls, that's cool. I don't really care, but do leave it in the comments anyway. Not really relevant to this episode, but historical accuracy is like a bit of an afterthought, maybe, in these things. We don't care about it. It takes place in secondary worlds, you know, the kinds of places where magic actually exists, so, like, who cares? In that spirit, get ready for sorcerers, wizards, and mages, and also some subversion at the end. Let's start with the most unorthodox, shall we? Sorcerers are not like other magic users. They don't spend long nights in the library poring over dusty tomes in search of Hammerstein's fifth incantation of where the fuck is the goddamn remote, Jesus Christ. I always put it in the one spot, and every time I look, it's not there. Sorcerers are magic made flesh. They are individuals infused with the power of some kind of primordial force. Their magic is not so much based on knowledge of a certain field of magic and how to use it, but of raw power and being able to effectively manipulate it. So essentially, they don't learn magic like we would math or biology, but more like a physical skill, like for instance, a martial art or skateboarding. They may have a mentor, like a sensei type figure, that helps them on their individual path to find mastery of their abilities. But ultimately, magic is intuitive to them. It is interwoven with the very essence of who they are as a person, which may or may not manifest in certain physical features. This does, however, limit sorcerers in a very fundamental way. First of all, you have a certain ceiling of power that you can achieve, depending on how much you are connected to the type of magic that you are connected to. There's no amount of hard work and dedication that's gonna make you be able to go beyond the power you have access to. You can become better at manipulating that power, become more efficient at it, and thus do more stuff, but there is a certain ceiling that you will never break through. Which conversely also means that if you're like super fucking powerful, you are super fucking powerful from day one. And there's a good to fair chance that you will fuck up and break something. The most important fundamental limitation of being a sorcerer is that you have access to one kind of magic and only one. A sorcerer might be infused with fire magic or life magic or metal magic or lightning magic, but everything else is off limits to them. I mean, you could potentially have sorcerers that have a natural inborn ability to do more than one power. That would be pretty cool, but also rare. Sorcerers do not cast spells. Sorcerers do magic. There's no incantations or spell components. There's no dancing naked on Toad Hill while the waxing moon is at its zenith. If they want something to happen, and they have enough power to make that thing happen, and enough control over their magic to make that thing happen, they can just make it happen. I like the idea of sorcering magic to be something that just happens to random people no matter their station if they are born with like certain extraneous circumstances. This makes it so certain powers are more common in people of certain areas and life circumstances. Like sand sorcerers might happen a lot in deserts or areas where there's a lot of beaches. Probably not deep in the forests of Greenia or in the mountains. Which, on the other side of that, you might have people trying to infuse their offspring with a certain kind of sorcering magic by creating what they believe would be the extraneous circumstances that make them sorcerers. That will probably lead to a lot of burned to a crisp newborns, Or, you know, maybe they make like magic abominations when that whole thing goes wrong and they sort of become monsters who are infused with that power, but they're not really human anymore. But all of this diversity of powers does mean that sorcerers wouldn't have like a singular culture. You would maybe expect different kinds of sorcerers, if they are common in a specific area, to among themselves have a certain kind of culture, but usually they will just be people who were sorcerers and they will be doing pretty well for themselves in their lives. You might, of course, also tie sorcering powers to a certain bloodline, which would probably lead to a lot of inbreeding and crossbreeding, but that's a whole different ballgame. Wizards are essentially the opposite of sorcerers. They may be required to have some base connection to magic as such, but that's where it ends. Wizards cast spells. They spend vast amounts of time in majestic libraries learning which components and which words and which flicks of the wand will make this certain effect happen. Where sorcerers learn magic as a skill, wizards learn magic as a field of knowledge that can be applied to the real world. Basically, they found the cheat codes and now they're working tirelessly to find new ones. If you sing this song and do this particular flick of the wrist, a column of water will rise from the lake. If you sort of turn around like this and then push forward and grumble weird, that'll shoot a fireball at your enemies. To wizards, magic is not intuitive manipulation, but cause and effect. You do this, that happens, with very little room for improvisation. So the best thing you can do is just memorize a huge library of spells, and then have it organized in a way in your mind that you always know which one is the best to use in which situation. This has the great advantage of wizards being able to adapt to pretty much any situation. Do you know spells that are mostly just relevant to farming, but you're going on an extended sea voyage soon? Just hit the library and learn the new spells that are important to doing sea voyages. There's books on them that are full of cool spells, and all you need to do is memorize them and you're good to go. There is, of course, the question as to how we even found those spells in the first place, and I really like the idea of wizards engaging in magic theory being super academic and labyrinthian in their culture. There's a lot of strong opinions, lots of theories and certain lenses through which to look at things, a lot of bickering, a lot of educated guesses that lead to extended periods of experimentation full of trial and error. A lot of spells were probably discovered by accident because some wizard thought, hey, if I do this movement and say these words, and also at the same time throw black powder into the sky, this and that will happen. But then some completely different happens, and then the wizard just pretends that that was his intention all along. Thus, I can imagine that wizards have a very universal and very elitist culture. After all, magic is not made to be understood by mortals. Yet these motherfuckers, they're as close as anyone is gonna get to actually understanding how it works. Depending on how rare and or powerful they are, wizards might be like the best paid employees at the imperial court, or they just might be the kings and queens and lords and ladies and empresses of the world. If you can just use the old swish and swoosh to disintegrate some beastly knights in plate armor, there's not a lot of people that are gonna stand in your way. But hey, what do I know? Maybe they're all just too busy bickering over magical theory to gain world domination. Or maybe there's some mechanism to keep wizards in check, as is the case in a lot of things. It's a very common trope and it's very useful to tell good stories. Mages are in between wizards and sorcerers, but they're also kind of their own thing. Like sorcerers, they have the ability to manipulate one fundamental force of magic in the universe. Magic. I'm talking pure 100%, not cut with rat poison or oregano, just magic. Let's call it the arcane force. You know, the pink and rose stuff, what glows and sometimes occurs in crystalline form. Though thinking of it, you could also have astral, ether, and eldritch as additional forces. and then you'd have like 4 fundamental forces of magic, but for the sake of simplicity, let's just refer to all of the fundamental forces of magic as arcane, or just the fundamental forces of magic. The point is, even though their grasp of that is intuitive, they still learn it also on like a field of knowledge level. Because the thing about arcane force is that it just sort of suffuses everything that there is, and if you know how to manipulate it, then you can manipulate everything it suffuses, which is everything. But the fundamental forces of magic do not permeate everything in like the same way, and the things that you need to do to manipulate certain things that are different from each other are different. So basically, you still have to specialize on certain types of magic. Like for instance, sort of the magic touch and the foci and the equipment required to manipulate ice will probably be very different from the stuff required to manipulate, say, air. So where sorcerers learn magic as a skill and wizards learn magic as an academic field of knowledge, mages learn magic as languages. So they know the language of the fundamental forces of magic intuitively. It's like their mother tongue. They learned it since childhood or something like that. But every kind of specialized magic has its own language, and they need to translate what they want to say in their mother tongue into those other languages of magic, and all of them have their own rules of grammar and their own vocabulary and whatnot. And while at first you need to do a lot of translating, eventually it just sort of becomes second nature to you. Obviously, you probably don't have the time to like learn every language, so you have to pick and choose. The academic culture of mages would thus be very STEM-like. I'm talking, science, technology, engineering, maths STEM, like university STEM, not tree plant STEM. They understand how the fundamental forces of magic interact with the world, and from there they can formulate theories and create experiments that can empirically prove or disprove the thing. Unlike the crazy illogical magic that wizards have to deal with, really what mages do is quite simple. They have their rules of nature and they can extrapolate from there. It's basically quantum physics, but depending on what scale you look at it and how it's applied to the real world, it works very differently. You might run into the problem where it's not possible to have like wizards and mages coexist in the same world, because that would mean magic is fundamentally different, but I found a solution for this, because wizards essentially what they do is they study the magic of the gods, which is not meant to be understood by mortals. They're so incredibly advanced in the way that they do things, and like wizards get some of the scraps. And there's a lot of spells that wizards have that mages, they have no idea how that stuff could work, because it's like super advanced alien technology, essentially. I do really like the 4 fundamental like aspects of magic though. The astral, arcane, ether, and eldritch. And maybe they're all just magic, but they're like different aspects of it, like how quarks are all quarks, but there's different kinds of quarks. But let's go ahead and do some subverting, shall we? So originally I wanted to make virtual reality the subversion for this episode, but sort of nothing interesting came of that, so I decided to cheat. So let's talk about the dark side of magic, the evil ones, the bad people who use magic for nefarious purposes. Except it turns out you were born on a cemetery because of just bad luck. That's just how it happens. Your mum was running to the hospital, but then it happened near a gravestone, and like deep beneath the earth is interred a leash, which just nobody knows that it's there, but it's an ancient leash and it is there. And also your mother died in giving birth to you, and that's a lot of problematic circumstances. So congratulations, you're now a sorcerer that can make zombies and shit, which as far as powers go is a pretty good one. The other guy over there, he can talk to tea kettles. That's not a very impressive power, but he's making something of himself. He started being a spy. And while that guy's out making the big bucks because he just so happens to have a socially acceptable sorcering power, you're sitting here not raising the dead because society, man. You didn't choose this power, it just came to you. Your dad is a priest, you're a good person. Every Saturday you go over to your grandma's out in the country and help her with the dishes or clean the house, and you don't even demand any money in return. You don't expect anything. You still receive cookies, obviously, but they're grandma's cookies. They're always good. But wouldn't it be nice if your grandmother, who is like old and weak, had someone to just help her out at the house all the time, that she could just command to do things and then the thing would do it? And the bullies at school, wouldn't it be nice if someone punched them in the face, just to scare them, not to actually seriously hurt them? And also the evil emperor is sending an army, and it just so happens that the benevolent and good lord of your local area, all of, like half of the people he sent into battle are dead. And wouldn't it be nice if they were not really, technically speaking, dead anymore? Or you could be like a life force giving magician who's a healer and like a great pillar of the community, but in reality, you're a sadistic psychopath who tortures people but keeps them alive with his powers. That's also possible. For a wizard, going to the dark side is definitely a choice, but also one you might be making with the best of intentions. But the dark side corrupts, and it's not because of something that's inherent to the dark side. It's just that if you start studying the dark side and your mates find out, even if it's like some really almost vanilla stuff, they will begin to ostracize you a little bit. And you'll get in touch with people for whom that is okay, and they will be in touch with people who are like way deep into the dark magic stuff. And it's basically the same of how political radicalization works. And before you know it, you're flaying babies and stitching their skin together for like a coat that can't be penetrated by any weapons, because that's just a thing that people do. And nobody has reminded you in a while that that's maybe not like morally good. For mages it would be a choice as well, but maybe one that's a little more tempting, still easier to get into, because after all, Eldritch is already one of the fundamental forces of magic. And you use Eldritch in pretty much all of the other schools of magic also, because it's just a thing that you need. And there's just a lot of potential if only someone like did research into using Eldritch more prominently. There's in like the dark sections of the library, there is some theoretical stuff that hasn't really been tested, and you can just imagine that like the applications that you could have for this shit. But since nobody's looking into it, you know, people are not really that happy about you maybe doing that. But if you grab some of those essays and dissertations from the library and maybe just experiment a little bit in private. After all, even if you're good at learning languages, doesn't mean that you're the same amount of good at learning every single language. Some languages might just work easier for you than others. And it turns out that all of the regular languages that you could be learning, you're just not that good at it. It's your academic performance is sort of lagging behind. And then it turns out when you study the Eldritch stuff, it really fascinates you and you just have an intuitive grasp of it. And who knows, maybe like necromancy isn't even considered evil in your culture. Maybe it's just another form of magic, because the people dead might as well put their corpses to use. Much of evil is just in the eye of the beholder. A lot of it is just taboos. If you're not hurting anyone else, like, what is the problem with raising the dead? Thank you for watching this episode of System Agnostic Classes. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, buying some of the merch. My book, this book, was supposed to come out on Saturday. It didn't. Oh God. It didn't come out on Saturday, as some of you may have been able to tell. The Kindle is already out, as some of you have been able to find. Don't buy it, because unless you're not planning on buying the paperback anyway, in which case, you could, but I'm not going to post the link, because if you buy the paperback, you will get the Kindle for free. So if you buy the Kindle now and then also the paperback, which isn't out yet, it's just a bad deal for you. And the reason for the delay is that Amazon's not happy with the cover. They sort of told me, oh yeah, look, the template that we gave you is, bullshit, so please extend the edges. And then I did that and sent it to them, and then they said, yeah, but look, the text on the spine, please move that down by like a bit. We could have told you this before in our first email, but for some reason we didn't. So yeah, it's still in review. And in that spirit, go play some like wizards and sorcerers and mages, or maybe have your own interpretations of the stuff. And see you around, cunts.